All right. So in this video, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go over, Emily, we're going to talk about how to think about strategy. And this is going to be a little bit more of an advanced training on strategy. I know you're really focusing on ministry strategy here in the internship. And so you're going through all of our strategy courses and our uh, advanced sort of decision making and strategic sacrifice course and a number of other things. You're going to obviously be implementing that into marketing and consulting type training. So one of the things that I want to point out, and you had just mentioned that in that sort of intro, in some of those intro videos to the strategic sacrifice course, you're talking about how pruning the vine is such a simple sort of way to understand ministry strategy. Well, what is producing fruit and what is not? And Jesus does this. I am the vine and you are the branches, and whoever does not produce fruit, will be cut off and thrown into the fire. And then he goes on to say, those of you who have been grafted in, right, the Gentiles, like, don't get prideful because I cut out the Jews and those are my people. And you're taking their spot, and how much more quickly will I cut you out and chuck you into the fire if you're not producing fruit? And so this kind of builds on the idea of, work out your faith with fear and trembling. There's a respect and awe side to our relationship with God, just as there is a grace and mercy side. And so that kind of does that. Well, when we're looking at a ministry, how do we know what to cut? And this is why that course is called Strategic Sacrifice. Probably we're just going to lump this right into that. Okay. So building on strategy, and strategy is what to cut. And so when you were talking about, well, the analogy of the vine is awesome. Now, what's interesting, and this is why the conversation we're going to have now is more advanced, the vine already exists in the church. Okay. So for example, if you're talking to a ministry client or someone that has a business and you're consulting with them from a strategic standpoint, what you're telling them to cut is more like planning. Like, your planning is what you do right now. I have $100 and I'm going to plan what to do with it. Strategy is you don't have $100 and you need to figure out how to get it and the most likely way to get it. So when you're looking at how the ministry is now, you're sort of planning how to cut and what to cut. And that's kind of what we're talking about. When we're talking about pruning the vine, I'm just planning, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to cut all the stuff that doesn't work so that the stuff that does work grows and is even more fruitful. That's great. What we're going to look at is strategy into the future, and how do we assess sort of what we might call strategic contingency planning. Okay. And so this is, how do you do the vine and the branches in the future? Okay. Any questions on this before we sort of get into the meat of this?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. So I'm going to draw while we talk. So with strategy, there are two parts. Number one, and these, if I boiled strategy down to the essential components, there are only two parts. There are the natural world, and I'm just going to say the world, and get rid of that. There we go. The world, and then there is human nature. Those are the only two things you have to account for when you're thinking in the future strategically. Okay. Strategy is when you're playing a chess game and you're looking at 5 moves out and you're trying to say, okay, what would happen if I did this? They do this, and then I'd do this, and then they do this, and then I'd do this, and then I'd win. I'm going to do that. Okay. So we're projecting into the future what would happen with the world and what would happen with people. And those are the broad factors that play into strategy. So if I created this product in a world where this thing's happening in the economy, how would that work out? And you just sort of logically reason it out. Now, this is not to say that you can tell the future, right? So I want to make a sort of a delineation or to draw a line between two things in sort of popular language, maybe. There is predicting and there's projecting. What I am talking about is projecting. We're not genies. I don't know the future. I don't pretend to know the future. And I don't really care what ultimately happens because I can't control it. God's in control of that. Okay, what I am interested in is projecting the most likely outcomes so that I can position myself, my ministry, my team, my family to end up in a positive position, whatever that is. And this is the case in any area that you look at that's really serious, be it military tactics. I work with I used to work, and I would love to do it again. For quite a while, I worked with a guy who is special forces, and he teaches you how to position yourself as you come through a door in certain ways. Well, why do I have to stand exactly that way? Because if you were to stand a different way, you're directly in line of, like, let's say, bullets or fire as as you stand there. Well, how do you know if someone's there? I don't know if someone's there. But if someone was there, you would be in the wrong place. So don't stand in that place. And so it is sort of a, what is the probability that someone is on the other side of that door in a tense situation, in like a SWAT situation? I don't know. Maybe it's 5%. The likelihood that someone's in that place where they'll get you is 5% on every door you go through. But the problem is you go through, 20 doors, and sooner or later you're in that situation. So is that a situation that you should account for in your training? Yes. So it's not that you suspect or you're predicting that any door is going to have that problem, but what you're doing is you're eliminating it as a possibility for every door. And so you're increasing your strategic positioning for success across a broad range of situations. Okay. And this is true in that situation with like tactical SWAT, uh, military combatives maneuvering. If you look at the finance industry, it's the same. What finance investor says you should take every single dime you have and put it in gold and silver? If you study that industry, that would be a very extreme position, because if all of your money is in exactly the same place and you just run into one problem, you're toast. So what do? Well, you put maybe some in real estate over here and some in stocks and bonds over here, and then you put some in precious metals, and you diversify the portfolio. So if the real estate market bottoms out like it did in 2008 and 2009, well, that's okay. It'll come back around sooner or later in 10 years, but hey, the tech stocks are booming and I've got some of that. And so you're always sort of balancing out. And that is a strategic play now, so that whatever happens in the future, you're in a good position. And so that's called portfolio positioning. In business, I think about this as well. And we're actually going to draw this out and you can kind of see this. But I have a small fleet of vehicles, which we're currently selling. But maybe a year ago, me and some other owners were reasoning out some issues. And there are two owners that I know. And between the three of us, we have a decent sized fleet. And we work closely together. And we're like, okay, Airbnb is implementing policies that could be an issue in the future. We're out here in Hawaii. And also, the political climate, these camper vans, these vehicles that you camp in, are getting really, really popular, and it's attracting attention from the government on certain islands. And it's like, how long until it's attracting negative attention on our island? Furthermore, many locals don't like tourists or tourist businesses, and for that reason, we're attracting attention we didn't anticipate. And so how long until one of these sort of things affects the business in a negative way? Well, it seems like there's a fairly high chance that that could happen. Okay, so what do we do? we need to firstly make sure we're obviously not in violation of any laws. That would be step one. Step two, get off of other platforms and try to build our own platform. That's the big one. Because if Airbnb decides they don't want us, and they'll just cut people, they do not care. And well, we need our own platform to book through. Well, I'm a marketer. We'll just build our own site to do it ourselves. And we did. So we started doing this, and about 2 months into building this site and scaling this site and getting bookings on this site, Airbnb starts cutting us because they implemented a policy where, or implemented or had, I'm not really sure, a policy where you cannot have any, like they have a section for RVs, but they cannot move. Well, our guests expect them to move. And so now we're in violation of the policy, or we were, I don't really know, but they just started randomly canceling all of the camper vans on all of the islands. And all of these camper vans started going up for sale on Facebook, and their value was like zero because there's just so, there's not that many on the islands broadly. But when you try to sell all of them at the same time, there is an influx of supply and a decrease in demand just because they're so cheap. So they drop in value. Well, what did we have? We looked into the future and projected the probability what happens if one of these sort of eventualities did happen, and what should we do to prepare for that if we think it's probable enough that we should position ourselves to succeed in that environment. And what do we have? We have a functioning website, and we have bookings coming in, and we had a couple other things that we set up as well. And we still have vehicles, and many other people kind of bailed on that industry. Okay. And so that also allowed us to raise our prices a little bit because other people are out. So any questions on that as we continue and I start kind of showing what this looks like in a drawing?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. So let me go here. There we go. And here we go. Okay. So we have a timeline. Okay. And this is how sort of this, I'm just going to go here. We'll go with T, and I'm going to draw. So this is time, and time is going forward in that direction. And here is you or I. This is a really beautiful drawing. There we go. And we're looking, and this is the present moment, right? So this is P, and this is what strategy is. In the present moment, we're looking forward, and then we're saying what is likely to happen as time moves forward. Now, there's always things happening, but at some point, time and the situation we find ourselves in, the current state of affairs will change. There's no if, ands, or buts. That's just the nature of time and time moving forward. So things could go like this, or things could go like this. What are those? I don't know, but they could go like this. Well, what happens if they go like this? Well, if they go like this, it could then go like this, or it could go like that. And you've got sort of the same thing on this side. And this is what strategy is. And, maybe there's a totally different rung over here. And this one comes out this way. And, you have all of these potential permutations of how the actual world could be. Okay. And so in the case that I gave an example of here, it's okay. Things are playing out. The vehicles are doing great. We're booking out, except we're starting to see indications that there might be some regulation governmentally put on these vehicles out here. So what do we do if that's the case? All right, well, it also seems that Airbnb might begin to have issues. What do we do if that's the case? Well, if this is the case here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have our own platform and not be dependent on Airbnb. Okay, this seems to be the most likely threat to the business in the future. And so what do? Well, we'll build our own platform, and then you go through the reasoning on that. Well, how do you do that efficiently, low cost, and quickly, and all this stuff? And, as it turns out, this actually happened. And so we're looking into the future, and we're looking at possibilities. Now, I will say again, we're looking at possibilities. We're not predicting. And another thing that we're not doing is we're not fear-mongering. We're not getting worked up. We're not biting our fingernails. And I used to do this, admittedly, because I've always been fairly good at kind of looking out and seeing what's coming and what may be coming and all this stuff. But it's not about fear-mongering. It's about two things. Over here. Okay, you've got one way you can do this where you're fearful and it's just sort of eating you alive. Okay, and this is through maybe what the Bible says is a spirit of fear. You're no longer, what does it say? Slave to a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and love and a sound mind, or spirit of faith is what other translations say. So fear is, I'm terrified of what the future holds because I don't control it and I need to try to control the future. That is a false belief about the nature of the world. There are certain things that you can control, and that is whatever you do. You control what you do, and you don't control anything else. You can't control other people. You might be able to influence them. I can control this phone. This is within my sphere of control. But once it's outside of my control, I have to let God take it. Now, if we're doing it out of a place of fear and we're just anxiously considering all the terrifying things that might happen, this is not only bad for your health, this is also, just sort of a fearful approach. What we're doing is we're doing this out of faith. Okay. And how do we do it out of faith? We're doing it out of faith because what I know is that God holds me accountable to what I know. Okay. And me being me, and this is not the case with everybody because not everybody understands how this works. I know I can look into the future and I can I can project probabilities. Okay. So what is the likelihood this branch happens? I don't know. I'd say 30%, and this isn't anything specific. I'm just, 30%, and we'll call this 60% likelihood. And there's a 10% chance I'm totally wrong and something like sprouts out of here and goes this way. Maybe that happens. So maybe I need to be prepared for the fact that I can't even see a thing that might happen. That's called a black swan. And that's frequently used in economics. So again, we're pulling ideas from various fields of study. Okay. So what do I mean by faith? Well, I'm looking into the future because I'm held accountable for what I know. So if God's called me to help ministry leaders and I see a thing happening, how can I best position ClickMill and our awesome interns like Emily? And how do I best position them and our past interns and our future interns and our clients? How do I best use my resources to position myself so that if a thing happens, we're in a great place to take advantage of it? And the way this works is there's no certainty. I'd probably position most of the resources to take advantage of this route. I would have a little something ready if something here happened, like, um, is it possible that in the next 24 months, there's a giant tsunami or hurricane? Yeah, I'm in Hawaii, that takes out ports, shuts down shipping, everybody panics. And also, even if there's like a forecasted hurricane out here, everybody panics and they go buy out the store. So there'll be like a couple days where shelves are pretty bare. But either way, like, is that likely this in the next 24 months? I wouldn't say so. Is it possible that there is we just had a magnitude 6 earthquake out here. We just had a giant forest fire. Like, do things happen? Yes. So is it good to have some resources set aside? So like, for example, during COVID, there was no meat on the shelf out here for like a month because the shipping lines got shut down and we did not get food. There's only 3 days of food on the island. So is it wise to have something set aside in a sustainable sort of way if something did happen? Yeah. Am I fear-mongering about it and thinking it's definitely coming, in exactly 12 months and predicting it and then allocating 100% of my resources to building a bunker in the basement? No. But, do I have a little bit like set aside so that if something were to happen, I'm not totally caught off guard and panicking with everybody else and going to the store? Yeah. Like, that's also wise. So So we're doing it out of faith because I believe God has good things for us at ClickMail and for the interns and for our clients and all this other stuff and for our subscribers. And he wants us to just be wise with how we position, use the knowledge that we have, which is greater or lesser and limited in extent. So we just use what we have to do the best in our ability. And once our ability is tapped out, that's when God shows up. So if I do my best based on the best understanding I have of both the world and human nature, like for example, on the world, is it possible that there's some kind of issue out here where the shipping lines get shut down and food's not coming to the island? Like I've already seen that since I've been here. So yeah, that's a possibility. That would be the world. Is it likely? I don't know. It's likely enough that I should probably think about it a little bit and have something ready. And allocate some resources. What's human nature? I'm even more confident that if there was something happening to human nature is that people would panic. Because number one, that is human nature. That's also why that's our first rule at ClickMail is don't panic. Because when you panic, you always do the wrong thing. But I've already seen them panic out here. A hurricane's coming. Oh, everybody panic and go buy all the food. Like I already got some, so I don't need to panic. I just sit here and watch everybody go buy overpriced stuff and overpriced gas and all this other stuff because I already thought about it. So I can just chill at home comfortably. So that is what I mean by the world and human nature. So when we have positioned ourselves as optimally as we can conceive, and God gave us a mind, so we should use it, we're shrewd as a serpent, innocent as a dove, but shrewd as a serpent. I'm looking at the world. I understand the world's not perfect. And when you use all of your ability, and it still goes to junk and the bottom falls out, thank God, because God's going to provide anyway. And that's the position of faith. Now, I want to work with God. So I want to do the best I can do. And once that's tapped out, I'm going to let God do everything else. I'm not going to sit around and wait and just say, oh, the Lord will provide. I haven't met one evangelist that sits around on the couch all day and says the Lord will provide and people just show up and he just witnesses them on his couch with potato chips. Like, no, you have to go out to your audience. That's what Jesus did. So it's a marriage of your ability and God's ability. And you want to do your best and not hold yourself to more, because that's when you get into the fear mongering, because you can't control the future. So you want to do your best to see what's coming. And then you want to do your best to allow God to take over the rest. You do your best, God takes the rest. That's my motto. You'll notice when you're doing more than your best, you'll start to get real anxious. And that means you're trying to control something that is uncontrollable. Now, we're going to have to end here shortly, but I do want to point out one way in which I am seeing this. And I'm looking, this is why this was a training this morning. Okay, so in regard to artificial intelligence, this stuff is progressing extraordinarily rapidly. Okay. And I want to show a little, let me see here. I can't make a diamond. Okay. This is why this is progressing so rapidly. Okay. So firstly, technology gets more complex every 2 years. What do I say? It doubles in the rate of progression about every 2 years. So it is getting exponentially faster. Okay. And exponentially, it looks like this. Okay. People think linearly. The world works exponentially. So this is exponential. So we're like, in my estimation, here-ish on AI technology. And people are just sort of expecting it to just sort of slowly go up. We'll be there in 10 years. I saw a post from 2 years ago saying we would never have a text to video generation AI in our lifetimes. They're like, our grandkids will see that. That is kind of what the world is expecting. And what is going to happen is going to shock people, because there's already, as of last week, called Soma. I can't remember now. Anyway, it is a shockingly powerful AI that takes your text and turns it into a full production quality, high definition video. Okay, so when you're talking about that, Sora, what is this? Let me see. There it is, Sora. Okay. So when you're talking about this, you're talking about entire industries. We're waiting for the video to load. There we go. Here is a flock of paper airplanes flying through the trees. And here is completely this is not a real person. This is not even a real place unless they specified it. Completely AI generated woman walking through the streets. The Wild Wild West mining town for gold rush. And then the prompt in here, I think specifies that it's like a drone photo flying over. Yeah, this one's got a pretty sophisticated prompt if you build this out. But I mean, this is just exactly what the prompt said. And this is going to eliminate the need for just tons of stuff. You think about how advanced the image creation. My mentor went to school to be a graphic designer. And he's like, this image that I gave him, he's like, this would have taken me a dozen hours to airbrush this thing. And like, we can do this in 5 seconds now. That whole industry and Shutterstock, once people figure this out, Shutterstock's gone. They just like, that whole thing is just poof, it's gone. Well, what's going to happen with the image generation, the text to video, is the text to video is going to knock out every video company. You're never going to need to hire someone with a video camera again, because it can just make anything you can imagine in real time. And you'll go, I don't really like it. Change this detail. And it's going to go bloop. Like Pixar, Disney. Why would you need them to do this when you can just take a Disney video like The Lion King and say, I want you to create me something in the exact same style as that, but with this storyline and these kind of animals. And then it just bloop, video, Disney quality production, different storyline, exactly as you want it. So you can see how rapidly these types of changes will create change in the economy. Now, to push that just a little further, we're like a hop, skip, and a jump. I don't even mean a hop and a skip. We're like a hop from being able to release an AI into QuickBooks. Okay, I pay someone $250 an hour to go in and reconcile our bookkeeping so that the IRS isn't trying to audit us. In 12 months, I will probably be able to get an AI to go through our QuickBooks and reconcile and do all the stuff that I would usually pay $1,000 for, and I don't need to pay anybody because it's free. As a matter of fact, I could probably do it now. It'll just be way more convenient in 12 months. And then you're talking about, and they've done studies on the most likely careers to get basically made obsolete. And it starts with the highest paying careers. Lawyers, the AI is going to know the whole legal code. I've already used AI to write business contracts, which would have cost thousands of dollars, and it can do it super fast. And it's really good. I've read them, which was super boring. Legal contracts, so lawyers, doctors, AI are already looking at scans and can diagnose cancer better than doctors who've gone through a gajillion years of medical school. Why? Because it's seen every single scan in existence. And so doctors are gone, lawyers are gone, accountants are gone, I already said that, lawyers. Anyway, there's just tons of fields that are intellectual fields that are going to just start disappearing. Now, that wouldn't typically be a problem. I think in the long term, it'll be generally a good thing, because that's actually a huge increase in value. You're no longer limited to the intellectual stuff you can get access to. But when you talk about the sort of agricultural revolution, someone invented it. So let's say there's 100 people here doing agriculture a long, long time ago. And this is the level of complexity in jobs, right? The tippy top being like the neurosurgeon or something. There was 100 people that used to farm, per however big of an area. Well, then someone invented a tractor. And over about, 100 years, 99 of these people stopped farming. They moved to the city. So there's 99 people here doing something different. And what happens? Well, there's one farmer on one tractor, and he now owns all the land that those 99 people owned. Okay, so those 99 people go what? And they go work in a factory in the city, because now we're in the Industrial Revolution. Well, then what happens? Then people come along with robotics and they automate the factories. So you got one guy in the factory running all the robots, and then you've got the rest of the people up here. So we'll call it 98. And these people were doing maybe intellectual jobs, and then the internet came along, and a lot of the knowledge that they might have gotten paid for, you can just Google now. And so now we're on Google. This is where we're at right now. And I didn't draw enough lines in this, so I'm going to skip it, but you kind of get the idea. Every time there's a shift. And what happens when these shifts happen is people migrate from down here because it's no longer necessary, and they go up here. And generally life gets better because there's more wealth. All the people's working up here used to have to work down here. Now we have all this stuff instead of just this stuff. Well, this transition, and I'm just estimating, took somewhere around, like, let's call it 100 years, right? Tractors invented late 1800s. And, people are slowly shifting out of this early 1900s into the factories. And then the factories over the next, I don't know, we'll call it like 80-ish years, are automated, and people are moving to the internet. Well, how long did it take the internet to start maturing and bringing all the people there? Well, like 40 years, like with the 90s. So 30 years since I was a kid. Windows 95 was pretty early on for computer technology and the internet. So you're looking at like maybe 30 years. And so you'll notice the rate at which these revolutions are happening in technology are faster and faster. And what that means is there's less time. And we've seen this, there are people who still are just like, well, I'm not really a computer person. Why? Because 30 years is about as short a time span as you can cram a revolution and still have broad adoption. Well, what happens when AI is taking out entire fields of work that people have studied their whole lives to do, and it is obsolete and it is no longer needed? That is too much change in too short of time, and it is looking more and more likely every day that is going to be a reality. For example, people in these AI companies like OpenAI, they have openly said they already have basically, it's called AGI, and this would be artificial general intelligence. If you were to say what this meant, right now, ChatGPT 4, as it is now, has an IQ of 155. Einstein had an IQ of 165. And artificial general intelligence would mean it would be like a 200 level IQ among the smartest people that have ever lived, except it knows every single subject in existence. That is what the CEO says they already have on the back end. There was an engineer that came out yesterday and said, we're actively not releasing this stuff. We're just giving little pieces so that the public can start preparing and getting comfortable with the idea that this stuff's going to come out. They said they're not going to go and just drop the whole thing at once because they're worried about societal unrest, that people are not going to be able to understand what is happening. Because over here, you had 100 years to figure out what to do when you didn't buy a tractor. Over here, you only had 80, and over here you had 30. Well, now you're going to have however long they decide to roll this stuff out in. And I don't think it's going to be slow, because Google, NVIDIA, ChatGPT, and Microsoft, these huge companies, are in a race to do it first. So the question is how slow are they willing to roll this out for the benefit of society and people being able to adopt in a way that's comfortable? Probably not that long, because they're also going to lose profit. Like Microsoft and ChatGPT will lose profit as soon as Google catches up. So they actually need to go fast so they don't lose the market share. So when we take this sort of idea, probably, right? So we'll say no AI, we'll say slow AI, and we'll say fast AI. Okay. What are the ramifications on society? Okay. No AI is basically already a 0% probability. It's already happening unless government comes in and says, nope, we're never going to develop this technology. It's too dangerous. I give that a 1%. I just can't see it. And that's not to say it is 1%. That is my estimation. Slow AI. Could they slow it down? Yes. And I would say 35% possible. I think it's less likely because governments are typically slow and tech companies are naturally fast. So I think the likelihood that governments pick up on it prior to tech companies just blowing past any marks that the governments would set to regulate and protect, I think is relatively high. So I'd say this is less likely because of how quickly tech companies move and how slow governments move. I think tech companies just slide past any barriers fast, 35 and that's third. So we'll call it 60 something, 60-ish% over here. We're going to get really rapid development. And that's really already the way things are going. So what happens in ministries, and this is why we're talking about this, what happens in ministries if this continues to develop rapidly? Well, firstly, number one, you're going to need someone. Well, how do I say this? There's going to be fear in ministry. And I would guess, and again, this is a projection, not a prediction, slow adoption in the church. I think businesses are going to run head on into this to drop costs because, like even in a Christian business, if I'm not competitive with other Christian ministries that do what I do, then I don't have money to feed my family. And that's a problem. So we have to adopt this rapidly. I can cut costs, and then that puts pressure on all of our competitors. And I say competitors loosely, but then they're going to need to adopt AI to be able to compete with me. And that's going to need me to further adopt AI. So in the business world, we're just going to just use AI as fast as it comes out, basically. Now, in the church world, I think there's going to be some fear. And also, we're usually slow to adopt technology from what I've seen. And so we're going to have some slowness. Well, okay, that's interesting. Furthermore, we are going to have the church, if it's slow, there's also a probability that maybe we're less competitive. And so there's a competitive, we'll just go here. And I mean, in the broad thing of the oh my gosh, competiti, competition. Okay, so how competitive is the church going to be in a world where everybody is like a superhuman and can write articles? We wrote 200 articles in 4 months for the new website for these vehicles. And I have a team of 3 at the time. One person wrote 70 of those in 4 months. That's nuts. It used to take 20 hours to write an article, and now it takes 1. Okay, so how does the church compete on a global level and get their ideas out there if we don't adopt this technology? Well, we don't compete. We actually become invisible. Okay, so there are some things to consider here, and their slow adoption. Well, then what are the opportunities here? If churches are maybe a little slower to adopt or maybe less competitive, does that then create an opportunity for Christians like yourself and me to come in and help them fill the gap? There has to be someone to help them transition this. I don't think the likelihood is high that they're just going to bump up themselves. And just because, I mean, ministry leaders don't even know what a keyword is. And that's like the very basic thing in all of marketing for the last 30 years. And if I say keyword, they look at me like I'm an alien. And so do I think that they're going to just pick up AI and run with it? It would have to be super easy to use. And at this point, we're not quite there yet. So it's very possible there's opportunity to help them move into this. There's also opportunity that if churches and ministries and Christians pick up these tools first, not only do we have a bigger voice in how they're used, which is great for the world, but also we have an outsized impact until the rest of the world adopts it. So, and that's what I'm using it for. We're using AI to create content and create really high quality content way faster than anybody else. Because by the time other people show up and they're like, oh, this stuff's super helpful. That's called the Overton window, is society's broad adoption of something and how long it takes. I'd like to adopt on the front end. So I'm like that first guy that bought the 1 Bitcoin and now I'm a gajillionaire. Well, I'd like to be the first one that starts implementing the use of these tools so that I can run way, way, way faster than everybody else not using it. And that could be the case with the church too. The church could dramatically catch up to the world in regard to influence if it could leverage the technology more quickly. So it could actually be a boon to the Christian worldview competing with other worldviews in the world if we could get it out. But you can see how some of these are probable. Now, I think the probability of the church being a slow adopter, likely that it would be less competitive, at least in the West, pretty likely. I don't think this is true everywhere. I think in the Philippines, I think Christians in the Philippines are going to crush it with AI because they're super tech savvy. And we have some team members over there. But anyway, opportunities could definitely increase for people like yourself, Emily, myself, because if this is true here, then opportunity, there's a big opportunity for us to help the catch up. I also think that another thing you're going to see is volatility increase. Okay, so panic. People are going to be freaking out because AI is going to be taking their jobs, and that wouldn't normally be a big deal because you have 100 years to find a new job or just finish your job and then you're done. But in this case, you're not going to have time to finish your job. It doesn't look like. And so then what happens? Well, you get people shifting very rapidly, and you get a lot of instability socially, governmentally, economically, and you get these big waves. Well, and maybe you can call that a stock market, whatever you want to call a bubble is the facet of reality. Well, that's not good broadly because things are more chaotic. It's really good individually if you can see it coming, because if I know people are going to panic when this stuff happens and there's going to be tons of fear, well, people sell things. People run when there's fear. And so in stock markets, that's a buy point. I'm going to be looking for opportunities where other people were unprepared. And this isn't, to say that I want to take advantage of anyone, but this is just the nature of reality. When everybody else is panicking, it is the Matthew principle. Take to the one who does not have and give to the one who has the five. Or take to the one who has one talent and give it to the five. That's the Matthew principle. When we talk about growth, you do not even have to grow in order to grow. All you have to do is sustain. Because when reality throws scary stuff out there, it's the people who knew it was coming and made their peace with it before it got there that are just going to be able to just think normally. Everybody else is going to panic and sell stuff and go nuts and shut their businesses down and do something crazy that they shouldn't do. And all the stuff they had has to go somewhere, and it's going to be to the people who just sort of saw it coming, and they don't even have to perform like a genius. They can just be average. And that is what my military combatives trainer taught me for military. He goes, your job isn't to be a superhero in very dangerous situations. He goes, you do not rise to the occasion and become some superhero. People fall to their level of training. So this is your training, Emily, for strategy. Everybody else is going to fall to their level of training, and it's going to be down here. And there's going to be a huge opportunity in between what is just average, which is where we want to be. I just want to be able to function like a normal person when everybody else is flipping their biscuits. And I'm going to be able to take advantage of this gap. Okay. So I want to fall to my level of training, and I want my level of training to be here or here or here. I don't need to be a superhero because I know where everybody else's level of training is. So as the volatility increases, the opportunity to take advantage of the Matthew principle, both in this world and in the kingdom, is going to be really great. And I mean that in kingdom opportunity. Churches are not going to be prepared for this, and a lot of churches are no longer going to be able to provide services. And what does that mean? Those people have to be shepherded by someone. And I'm not saying that's me, but this is what we're training the interns here in this program for, is to be the type of person who is capable of getting the kingdom fruit in spite of circumstance. And unfortunately, a lot of ministry leaders and churches are dictated by circumstance because we don't really look and understand how the world works. This is, to the best of my understanding, how the world works in a biblical fashion. And if you can just position yourself wisely and look down the road and say, well, what's likely? Not that I'm afraid, but what's likely? And how do I take advantage of that in the most godly way and logical way possible? You're going to have a higher statistical likelihood of ending up on the right side of things, as opposed to being the person who's panicking down here at the bottom and flipping their biscuits. Any questions? I know that's a lot, and I do have to go. I'm actually a little late for a call, but is there any questions you have on that?
Yeah, I did have one question.
Yes.
So you're projecting different things that could happen
Yes.
in the future. So say you have like these three options, and then you have so one of the options you give a very like low percent
Mhm.
to, but it could have a very like big impact.
It could have a
Um,
disproportionate impact. Yes.
but say like you're not expecting it to really happen. So like what if you don't prepare enough for that to happen, but then that ends up happening?
Great. So
What would be the best way to go about that?
yes, absolutely. Okay. And the answer here, and this is locus of control. So when you're going through the mental models in the strategic sacrifice course, the answer to that is in the locus of control. And this is how you stay sane and not anxious and fearful, because you can only do your best. And once you've done your best, you let go, right? My personal model is you do your best to the best I can do my best. That's how good I want to do. And the rest I want to let go of, because I can't do perfect and I can't always get it right. So what am I going to do to the degree that I understand the world and people and how they'll react to certain things? I'm going to look forward in my mind. And this is a skill, right? You build this over time. Chess players are made, not born, generally. And, you know, I'm going to do the best I can to position myself in a strategic and stewardly and wise way. And, if I get hit by a meteor, all right, sure. Then that's what it is. And I'm all right with that. And God's going to have to pick up the slack because I couldn't do good enough for that. And that's fine. That's what the grace is for. When I reach the edge of myself, that's where God takes over. So when I've done my best and I'm walking into a situation where it's totally out of control, and I'm thinking for me, walking into a hearing with a judge who has full power over whether our foster kids stay or not, did we do everything we could? Yes. Is it in our control? No. And that's the moment you begin walking on the water like Peter. And then you get to choose, okay, this is the moment when everybody else panics and they freak out. What am I going to do? Just if I can just function normally, that's when all of the forethought and preparation comes into play. All I have to do is just not panic and just trust that God's going to take it from there, because I have no ability there. And that's where you want to be when everything is said and done and it leaves your control and it leaves your ability, you hand it to God. And that's when you're in the fiery furnace. That's when you're walking on the water. That's when you're in the lion's den. That's when you're surrounded by the enemies. What you can't see at that moment is that God's armies of angels are surrounding you. And that's when you have to have the faith. So you do the preparation and the work to the best of your ability on the front end to prepare for victory, because that's what God has. And then when time for preparation's over and the storm is upon you, you just let it go and do your best to just have peace. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I will leave you to your tasks this week. I'm going to stop the video here